This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From Not a Pipe Publishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's secret word is desert varnish.
Welcome, everyone, to Writers Not Writing. Today's guest is Nan C Ballard, a retired emergency manager with a previous life in natural resources management. After years of environmental assessment and operations manuals, she now writes poetry, sci-fi cowboy series, and other fun stuff. She gardens haphazardly, enjoys exploring parks, wildlife refuges, and museums with her husband, and supports her fellow writers as a volunteer with Willamette Writers. Her Under Carico's Moon series includes Distant Trails, Deep Canyons, and Tricky Ground, which I believe will be available the day this launches. So if you can pre-order Tricky Ground, do so immediately. But you might already be seeing the book itself the day this appears. Welcome, Nan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So as you know, the first thing we do is tell our podcast viewers about what we're wearing. Folks watching on YouTube can, of course, see the costumes that we've got on, but we need to make sure that we convey those to the folks who are listening. So what is it you've chosen to wear for your costume today?
Well, when I get done here, I'm getting ready to go out and take a ride with a couple of my characters. Horseback, of course, must be. So I've got on my Stetson hat. I've got a green silk wild rag, a denim jacket and jeans, a braided horsehair belt with a copper concho buckle, chink style chaps, cowboy boots, and copper inlaid spurs, since copper's the dominant metal on my world Carico. So
Yes.
It's got to be copper.
Well, I went with a sci-fi cowboy theme as well, but very, very different from Carico. So this is a pretty traditional spacesuit that I'm wearing, something you might see out of NASA today. And then I just covered it in rhinestones. So it's not at all like what you would find on Carico. Carico, the Under Carico's Moon series, for the folks who have not read it yet, is not Western in the sense of, Sergio Leone gunfighters, out in the streets, shooting each other. It is actual people who are working ranchers, only on a colony world. And so it's really, really cool in the way that it is kind of inverting some expectations about this is what a Western always seems like. And at the same time, it is, doing great work as a sci-fi. So I love that series, and I'm very excited for people to get to the third, because it just keeps getting better and better. So yeah, but I'm getting off topic. So this is a show about procrastination. What has been distracting you in terms of pop culture this last week?
Well, I've never been real good at pop culture, and I'm getting old enough where I don't even care about most of pop culture. But I got to tell you, streaming video is just marvelous to somebody that grew up with 3 TV channels, and most of those didn't come in very well.
Mm-hmm.
So especially YouTube, what a rabbit hole. I can always find something on YouTube. Love archaeology and paleontology and of course all that writing stuff that we're not going to talk about here.
Yes, it is a wealth of resources, so sometimes too much.
Sometimes too much. Things like just the other day I was watching something where they were talking about the senses. We think about we have 5 senses and how we maybe have several more, and things like, sharks and whales being able to navigate across thousands of miles of ocean, and as they radio tag, and they can see that these animals go straight line. They know exactly where they're going. And that you've got some humans that have, blind people that can use clickers to echolocate and tell what things are. I was watching something on language the other day, and there are languages in the world where people don't orient to what's left of me, what's right of me, what's front, what's back. They orient to what's north, what's south, what's
Wow.
east, what's west, and they know, they
And their
always know
internal compass.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they always know exactly where
Yeah.
those directions
That I
are. And
that my fiance and I have had lots of discussions about this because my internal compass is really good. Like I can say, okay, I know that is north, and she will point to something. She'll say, "Oh, we're gonna go down towards this place," and I'll have to say
yeah,
that's the
I
like but I've just got a really good internal compass,
yeah.
and I
When we
don't know where
yeah,
that.
when we first were getting ready to move here from Northern California, from very far Northern California, I must say, almost to the border. Um, it was December when we came house hunting, and the valley was socked in. We were here for 3 days and never saw the mountains. And I got so turned around, and when I looked at houses, went on Google Maps and looked at houses that we looked at where I was completely 180 degrees off.
Yeah.
But if I leave my truck out in the middle of Nevada in the morning on horseback and make a big loop, I know where that truck's at.
Yeah.
I know that that direction right there is where the truck is at.
And I wonder how much that's almost an unconscious, like when you step out of the truck, you're orienting yourself around things in nature and saying, okay,
Yeah.
that thing is north. And
Yeah.
therefore, once you've got it in your head, this is, I find the only places where I will get genuinely lost and mixed around are interior spaces. And it's things like, a casino in Las Vegas, where they very intentionally
They're
want you to get
designed
lost. And
that
there's
way. Yeah.
not this natural, but yeah, I'm always
So,
like, that mountain is north. Once I know that mountain is north, I know where
yeah.
I'm going.
And the downside is when you get out on a very level piece of ground where you have no landmarks.
Yep.
You're in the trees or something, you can't see the landmarks. And that's the only kind of place where I've ever gotten so completely lost and turned around that I had no clue which direction I needed to go. Especially on a gray day when the sun's not giving you any clues.
Yeah,
So
but I do think about how many of those clues we are taking in all the time, without barely, a conscious thought. Oh yeah, I remember dawn, and therefore I know this direction, and so
yeah.
yeah,
So
I
I've got so
recognize
many
where the shadows were this morning, and I see where the shadows are, in the afternoon,
right.
and therefore I've got my east and west figured out. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so all kinds of fascinating things on YouTube,
yeah,
and a lot that I try to avoid
yeah.
because you have to think critically about what you're watching.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that is one of the dangers of the algorithm is it takes you from something you're interested in and it says what will keep you engaged and learns
Yeah,
you and then says the thing that's going to keep you engaged is something that is more outrageous than that. And the algorithm has no concern for whether it's accurate. Like that's just not a concern. So it's let's take you to something more outrageous and you're going, "Oh, this is shocking and interesting." Well, yeah, maybe it's also inaccurate. And then it
yeah,
will inevitably lead you to something that is just wildly
yeah.
well, my pop culture thing for this week, if folks have not seen it, and I know this is not new information to most people, but the new movie Dungeons and Dragons is really fun. Highly recommended. I went in with low expectations because previous Dungeons and Dragons adaptations have been really bad. And this one is, they didn't, fall into a bunch of the traps. They didn't feel like they had to explain everything to you. They just said, if you know this world already because you're a player, great. If you don't, we'll tell you enough that you can enjoy this story, but we're not going to, burden you with a lot of exposition. And then they just told a really fun story in this world. So if have you seen this one yet?
No, I haven't.
It is
I
worth your
haven't.
time. It is just a fun night at the movies. So
I've
check
seen
that one
good
out.
reviews on it.
Yeah, it's well done. So what about in this week's news? What has gotten your attention?
Oh, I'm really trying to avoid news these days, although there are some itches that I seem to just scratch. But I don't use something like Google. I don't use news accumulators. I go directly to news websites that I want to watch. And interestingly, one of my favorites is Al Jazeera.
Yep.
They're US. They do very good news, but I do get weekly dispatches from an online magazine, Anthropocene magazine, and
Oh,
they summarize research on things like climate and they're looking for interesting and innovative ways of addressing different problems. And of course, right now, climate is a huge one, but there's a lot of new thoughts and information on solar energy. I mean, there's a lot of push. I had someone say the other day, well, all they're, in terms of politics, all they're pushing is this change to electric vehicles. That seems to be the only thing anybody wants to do. And somebody's not looking deep enough.
Right.
But on the electric vehicle front, of course, a couple of concerns. One of those being having enough electric power generated to support them.
Right.
Especially
if in some cases we're getting it from dirty sources. Coal
in
order to power electric vehicles is not a solution.
And then when you start looking at solar in particular, solar arrays take up a huge amount of space. And so there's a lot of interesting things out there now on things like putting solar panels over the top of agricultural fields. You have to have the appropriate crop that can grow with a little less full sunlight, but with some careful design, not only do you have a little bit of shade for crops, you lose less evaporative water from evaporation. And if you are careful in the design and study, this discovered that if you put the panels at the right height, they stay cooler and they work more efficiently.
Oh, that's cool. This is a real issue. When I was in Greece, there were farms in Italy. There were farms where they had done the math, and the farmers had said, I make more money from electricity than I make from crops. What I'm now going to grow here in my fields is energy, which is, it's capitalism doing what capitalism does. But the problem there is there were things that were being produced that are no longer being produced. And that's a balance we will have to rediscover. We can't say, well, no more food because we have electricity. Like we are going to have to figure out how to do that. So that's exciting, figuring out how one can benefit the other. And it sounds like it's symbiotic. They're both benefiting.
With some limitations. But then the other piece, another piece of that is to use existing rooftops and existing structures. So you're not taking up additional land, but you're putting those solar panels on top of Walmart or Home Depot or all of those big. You could do solar arrays over parking lots.
Yeah. I mean, every parking lot is just absorbing sun and that energy.
Yeah, and you cool the temperature of the area by doing that. And now I was just seeing last night that they've actually developed the mats like you set your cell phone on top of to charge it. They're developing mats that go on the ground under your electric vehicle. So you simply drive into the parking slot, park over the mat, and your vehicle charges while you're sitting there, and if you and you then don't have to store that power from the solar array and then drain it down at night. So
which is a big issue. Although I was telling my students about this really great idea, and I'm not sure that it's actually been put in place yet, but it's kind of in a theoretical stage. But using solar arrays to you set up a bunch of solar arrays at an angle and create a laser. Essentially, you charge all this into this super concentrated beam of light and heat, and you blast it into a giant block of salt. And the salt is a wonderful nut conductor. It holds all this heat for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And then with a hole that's drilled in the salt, you just run water through it at night. The salt is so hot at that point from all the day's energy, it creates steam, and you've created electricity, and that way you can use the day's power at night throughout. And so figuring out ways to store the energy so that the solar power is not only available during the day is going to be another big challenge. And
that battery technology is getting better and better, and of course all of these things have effects. I mean, you've got to have the materials to make those batteries with. So if you can find ways
Well, and that's what I thought was so interesting about this
fewer.
was it was just a giant block of salt. Like we don't
Yeah.
have to go out and find, high tech, rare earth metals and put them together. You just get a giant block of salt and run water through it. Like the actual materials are relatively simple, and even
Well,
a layperson can understand how that functions.
You extract that salt in a desalinization process and pack it into a container, and then you have the potable water.
Right. I mean, yeah. So it's solving another problem. So
Which
this is
I hear people, especially when you start talking about Southern California. Well, just you've got a lot of seawater. Desalinization is a very high energy
yes,
process.
exactly. It's expensive and energy intensive. So
water's going to be probably the crisis before. And especially this winter aside, this winter is going to make everybody think we're not so bad off. But
right. Well, and that's the way it's going to be is, we've been fine for the last 2 years. And then we get a 10-year drought.
Yeah.
It's And Southern California is where it's going to be kind of the tip of the spear on that, because you've got Baja, Arizona, Southern California, Nevada, all have rights to the same river. And, that has worked so far because there's been water in the river. And as soon as there isn't, those states are going to be in, legal conflicts that could turn into more than legal conflicts. Like it's going to be life or death struggles if they run out of that water. There's a lot of people.
Yeah, that Colorado River is in seriously overly adjudicated.
Yes.
There has never been enough water in that river.
Yeah, so we'll see how that plays out. Well, I've been concerned with a situation. One of the stories that's been getting my attention as a book publisher and a teacher of literature is what's going on in Missouri with defunding their library system out of Peak. Have you heard about this? Yeah. So
I've seen a little bit about it.
I
saw something today that they may have decided against doing that.
I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that it is embarrassing enough that and then there's enough backlash. But that's the kind of thing where it's part and parcel of a larger program to say, let's get books away from people, at all costs, even if it means we have to get rid of all the books. And that should be really concerning to us as writers. And,
instead of parents who are concerned about what their children might read, just not sending them to the library and leaving the library there for everybody else.
Right. Yes. How can I have decided I need to protect everyone from this book rather than my own child from this book. That's a scary step that's going on. And so I've been working, locally and communicating with people at the state level and saying, how do we put in some protections that make it so that librarians get to make those decisions? I am concerned about, if we shift the power to make those decisions away from, say, local school boards or local, libraries to the state, that seems like a protection in a state. But then the state government flips and you've now handed all of that power to the book banners. So how do you make sure that stays in the hands of library, people who are committed to getting books to read them?
I have enough of an issue with Oregon on the library issue, having come from states where the libraries were county systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in the county. I do not live in town. And therefore, if I want to access the local library, legitimately, I have to pay extra to it because my property taxes don't go to that library.
Right.
But that's also a discouragement to a lot of people who live outside of the boundaries of town.
Yeah, it's a barrier.
Instead of having a countywide library system that taps everybody's property values.
Or a statewide system,
or a statewide, but county seems to be counties where the property taxes and the special district kinds of stuff are generally done. So.
That's our library system certainly needs work, and also I feel like it is under threat, and that is worrying.
And
one of my kind of larger worries is we have a tendency here in Oregon to say, isn't it good that we're not dealing with this thing that's happening in Missouri? Isn't it great that we're not dealing with this thing happening in Florida? And I'm watching it saying, it's coming this way. We just had some books that were banned in Canby. We've got what's going on with the Newburgh School Board, and it's like, this is coming here. We can't, rest on our laurels and say, this will never happen here in Oregon. This will happen in Oregon if we're not careful.
I grew up in Idaho,
Yeah.
when Idaho was a very much different place than it is today.
Yeah. 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 So
So
being prepared, I think, can be wise.
yeah, this is why I tried not to look at a lot of news very often, because it stresses me out badly.
Yeah, yeah, and I share that. I feel like I will get stressed if I can't find some outlet, some way to do something about it. But when it's a story like that, and I can say, I need to message my legislator, I need to,
Yeah,
communicate with a librarian about how we write some policy. Because I agree, if it's just consuming it and stressing ourselves, we're not doing anyone any good. But
yeah.
how can I get engaged?
I somebody I worked for at one point had a saying, and he sat everybody down in a staff meeting one day when there was all kinds of griping going on in the department, and sat everybody down and said, okay, look, if you're talking to somebody who can do something about it, you're complaining. If you're talking to anybody else, you're whining. Quit whining.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right. I would much rather be engaged in saying, let's make a change, even if that is complaining. I'm willing to complain, but yeah, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
exert, and also just, my own mental energy. There are things that are beyond my power. Although it does worry me when it comes to things like, global climate change, where it feels so big for everyone.
Yeah.
That we say, oh, there's nothing I'm like, I've got solar panels on my house. Well, there's got to be larger systemic changes than individual action on that. And so that is, and I do think we as sci-fi authors have a role in that. I'm working on a solar punk piece. There's a local community group, this is very cool, where they have put out an all call for authors locally to write stories set locally that are solar punk, so that people in our own community are starting to think about what might the local, this community feel like in a solar punk future, which I think is a really brilliant way of helping people here not think, oh, this is someone else's problem. Like, our own community will have to change. So I'm working on that story. The challenge with solar punk is, and you'll be able to relate to this, is you're creating a setting which is a utopia, which means there's no conflict. Like, what if we actually solved all of the problems? So then you've got to create another conflict that is personal within this setting, and so that's I'm struggling with the story, because I'm going, they've solved the biggest problem. They've learned to live in harmony with nature, and now the problem is interpersonal, and okay, but I'm getting into process. I shouldn't do that.
You shouldn't do that. And I was about ready to jump into some explanation of book 4, because it kind of gets gently into some of that stuff.
Yes.
But,
so hobby horse, when you're not writing, what have you been working on lately?
Well, in relation to the news and stuff, I do try to do some mindfulness exercise, but I'm terrible at meditation. I cannot make my brain not wander all over. A mindfulness class I took, they talked about it being like a puppy, that runs off and you have to pull it back and sit it back down. So what I do is I'm not a great artist, and I'm having a hard time getting over the idea that everything has to look photorealistic. So I do 30-minute sketches, pen and colored pencil, generally from a photograph. I've been working through a lot of animals, Joel Sartori's photo arc from National Geographic, which is just the animal against a black or a white background.
Yeah.
And I'll sit down and give myself no more than 30 minutes to try to do that. And the focus on the line and the focus on the colors, because I'm using just a set of 12 colored pencils. So getting the colors, that really helps me focus on that.
That's a great practice.
Yeah.
And I think you're right.
Now, of course,
realism is really, I mean, it's almost difficult for us. I have to say to students when we're, reading literature, like, realism is a relatively modern phenomena. Like, pre, Ibsen and Chekhov, people were fine with their stories not being realistic. They recognize this is a story. And I think the same is true of our art. Like, pre-photography, people went, this doesn't have to look like the thing. This is a piece of artwork. But that's now a challenge for us to kind of get beyond that and say this can be a little more impressionistic. There's no shame in that.
Although prior to photography too, the only realistic depictions you got of a lot of things were art.
Right. The scientific drawings,
and travel. a friend of mine did put out a book from Cairo to Beirut. And what he did is he followed the tracks of a Scottish artist who traveled that route in 1839, somewhere in that neighborhood. And he tried to go to the same spots and do, and the original guy, I can't think of his name now, did very, very realistic watercolor kinds of paintings. And Sunil does urban sketching, so they're very loose and, but it's just amazing how many of the locations he could find that he could, that where the buildings in the cities are still so much the same.
Yeah.
But that was, those that original artwork was some of the original introduction that Europe got to that part of the world.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of very realistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the scientific, the botanicals and stuff. I'm just in awe of the people that can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. But for a mindfulness practice to be able to say, I'm not going to stress if this isn't exactly photorealistic. I am going to focus on, did I get this color right? Or did I get this line right? Rather than did I get the entire composition to be exactly like this image? I think that letting go is part of that.
It is nice when they come out where I can tell what they are supposed to be.
Right. But, I've mentioned on the show before, one of the things that I've gotten into is bonsai because it's never done. Because the bonsai is not complete, that's actually good for me to let go of that impulse to say, I'm going to take on this project and it must be complete today. Nope, I'm going to trim this bonsai a little. And then if I overdo it, I'm actually doing harm. I'm just done for the day, and that is a challenge in, our kind of Western European mindset that says, everything must be, this is a project and knock it out and check it off the box. And the bonsai is never going to be done.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, I hate to call it weed control. I don't tend to call many things weeds, but vegetation management at my house. It's like, as long as I can keep a big enough stretch in the garden bed open to put the plant in that I want, then that's fine. And my flower bed out along the front of the front yard, if I take the weed trimmer to it and cut the tall wild grass down low enough, then you can see the flowers coming up through it, and that's good enough. And
accepting good enough, getting to the place where we can say that's good enough is hard for us, but it's really valuable. I think that's important for writers too. We have a hard time saying this. I lack the ability to make this sentence better, but I need to move on.
Anyway.
Yeah, and you've got a lot of land that you're working on taking care of out there.
Yeah, we've got almost 18 acres and most of that's a lot of it was in hayfield, but it's not well suited to hay, so we're just letting it go to pasture. And we have a neighbor up the road that raises grass fat beef, and so he brings these cows down for a few weeks every summer, and I keep enough to keep my 2 horses happy. And
my brother and sister-in-law are looking at purchasing a farm in Ohio, and one of the things my brother and I were talking about is getting into bees. It's capital intensive at the beginning, but once you get that kind of pattern down and you've got your customers and that kind of thing, and he's like, the world needs bees. The
world needs bees. I think we need to find better ways, more humane ways of managing bees, because commercial bees are just kind of hauled around and treated like they were nothing very important, individually. And I'm glad, one of the things I'm happy with now is there's getting to be so much more emphasis on a small scale on local native non-honey producing, but pollinators that
I need them for my garden. I'm looking at the trees I've got in my backyard, and they are blooming like crazy. And I'm going, I need pollinators. I need my pollinators to show. I wrote a poem about it this week, calling all bees. I need bees.
Yeah, our trees are not blooming yet. We have, I think it's 17 Asian pear, regular pear, apple.
Yeah, that's what I've
And
got,
they're
pear
not
and the
blooming
Asian
yet.
pear, and the pear is not yet, but the Asian pear is
Uh,
wild with these white
yeah,
flowers. Just it has exploded, and I'm like, that's great, and I'm worried that it's too soon and there are no bees out here because it's
yeah,
chilly. So
yeah.
yeah,
And then we've got the whole question of trying to keep the blackberry and the English hawthorn from completely taking over the pasture.
yes, that's
Constant effort there.
yeah, that's I'm fighting that battle myself. I don't think that I'll.
Yeah, it's amazing how the blackberries will pop up in the middle of another bush where you thought you had them all gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then drop something and then come up from there. Like they are
Yeah,
evolved to be successful.
yeah,
They're tough.
certainly.
Well, let's take our ad break. And when we come back from our ad break, I'm going to ask you about what you've been daydreaming about.
Ah,
Available May 2nd from Karen Eisenbrey, author of the Daughter of Magic trilogy and the Saint Rage duology, a new science fiction novel, Ego and Endurance. In this space exploration adventure modeled on Ernest Shackleton's disastrous Antarctic expedition, Ruby Ladd is commanding the first crewed mission to the asteroid belt, ready to redeem herself after a tragedy on Mars 5 years earlier. She never asked for a nosy filmmaker whose search for a story will only reopen old wounds. A trip to the asteroid belt is just what Heartgunner needs for his next thrilling documentary. He suspects the heart of his story lies in the commander's past, but she's not talking. When disaster strikes, Ladd and Gunner must work together for the crew to survive. Johanna Hoyt, author of Believing is Seeing, says, a funny, tender, and eye-opening science fiction adventure, love story, workplace drama with vivid descriptions of the wonders, perils, and incongruities of outer space, as well as the spaces inside us. You can pre-order your copy now. Also available, starting April 18th, Nan C Ballard's Tricky Ground, Book 3 of the Under Carico's Moon series. Lee Von Cory and Seth Riley discovered a community of non-human castaways whose existence threatens the future of the human settlement on the frontier planet Carico. The leader of the hidden enclave frees Seth and Lee to go back to the human settlement with one task: deliver a message of peace to Carico's leaders. Lee and Seth have miles of wilderness to cross on horseback, pursued by a contingent from the enclave. And among their fellow humans, they don't know who to trust and who has their own plans for the planet. The future of Carico is on the line. Miko Azul, author of the Demons of Morelia series, says, navigating human and interspecies culture, politics, love, betrayal, and surviving the bleak landscape of Carico complicate Lee and Seth's nearly insurmountable task of saving their world from outsiders. And Karen Eisenbrey, author of Ego and Endurance, says, a satisfying conclusion, full of thrills, twists, and lovably stubborn characters overcoming obstacles. Order your copy now. Welcome back, everybody. So I'm here with Nan C Ballard, author of the Under Carico's Moons trilogy. And Nan, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
well, this between the time that we're recording this and the time that it'll be broadcast, if things had gone differently this spring, I would have been gone on a trip right now. I would have been on an 8-day canoe trip through Labyrinth Canyon on the Green River in Utah on a writing retreat. So I'm daydreaming about what I'm missing out down there.
Yeah.
I did that trip in October of 2020, which was interesting. Just getting there and back was an interesting experience at that point.
So how does it work as a writer's retreat? I mean, are you writing, going down the river, most of the day? Or are you stopping and writing along the way? How does that work?
A little bit of both. And in this case, it's the lead writer is Craig Childs, who does a lot of natural history, environmental, very interesting, and very. I've heard him say he's not a poet, but he writes tremendous prose poetry. Everything he writes is.
Yeah.
And then his wife, Deva, is a poet, ex-poet laureate of San Juan County in Colorado. Anyway, and just you would love her. She's your sense of humor and hers are, So what we would do is Labyrinth is very smooth water. It's probably a little rougher this time of year than it was in October when we were trying to avoid sandbars. But you can just kind of pull all the canoes together and have a conversation, or lay over, leave halfway through the day, or lay over a full day someplace and hike back up into the canyons, because Craig knows where to find the rock art and where to find all the interesting stuff. And but it's just
that sounds great.
Incredible piece of country. And it's like you've got places where the sandstone walls, where the river has swept against the sandstone, and you've got an overhang there, and you can pull in under that and just run your hand along that millions of year old sandstone. And the desert varnish, the black marks and red marks that come down from the water washing over the sandstone, and then the petroglyphs, pictographs. I get them pictographs. Anyway, one of them is pecked into the rock. They're pecked into the desert varnish, so you see the stone behind it, so that it shows up. And it's just and then when I was there, the trip I did get to go on was the last week of October of 2020.
Yeah.
Which was a lovely week to be completely off grid.
Yeah.
Because down in that canyon, there is no cell service.
Nothing. Yeah.
Carry a sat phone for emergencies. That late in the year, there were hardly any other people on the river. And it was just completely isolated and out of touch and enclosed in that protecting canyon.
Yeah.
And we spent, so the last night was Halloween night, and it was a blue moon.
That sounds like a dream.
And so it's like, what would it have been like now in the spring with the higher water? It more towards new moon, when you got don't go to dark sky places on a full moon. You lose the effect, So it would have been really interesting to go.
Yeah, that would have been cool. I'm thinking as you're describing it, like, so I've gone kayaking on the Willamette, which is a very different experience than going on the Deschutes, and the Deschutes is so soft and slow and very relaxed, and that sounds like it's that kind of water. Like, you're not worried about the rapids.
That stretch from the town of Green River down to the Colorado is very flat water. Farther upstream is wilder water, but it's a really nice place just to float and soak it all in. And
I'd never thought about, that kind of flat water as writer's retreat, as, a way
to,
that's cool.
To spend that time with a bunch of writers. That was really cool. It was great. And it would have been really nice to have gone again.
Yeah, well, you're making me think we should set something like that up on the Deschutes. The trick with the Deschutes is the mosquitoes. Like, it's bad at certain. I was there in, I think it might have been late July, early August, and it was. I mean, you could just see them, like just like this layer of hair on my hands. Oh, that's not hair. That's just solid mosquitoes. You're just getting bit up like crazy, even with everything on there. And it is not a great place to fish, because you are just standing. But
so I expect there may be more insects this time of year. The last week of October, when it was getting down, I think it got to 17 one night.
Oh, yeah.
On that trip, you don't have to worry about mosquitoes.
No, the cold is taking care of you in that way. It's you're going, I'm so cold and so glad it's so cold, because there are no
but it was just a really good way to get away from it all.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Oh, yeah. Now you've got me dreaming about how could I either get involved in one like that, or we should put together a writer's retreat that's a rafting retreat. I would love that.
Yeah. Well, and the trick there is you simply find an outfitter that does those and put together a group, so that you don't have to worry about all of the details that they're expert at.
Let somebody else handle that part, and then put together a group of writers and say, we would love to do this. I think that would be really cool. So other announcements, what's going on? I know what's going on with you. Well, what is your big announcement?
Well, of course, the big announcement is the release of Tricky Ground, which I am really happy to see out. I'm so glad that we were able to do the three of them fairly closely together.
Yeah.
But also that gave me the chance to do that cleanup work and all those details between the three. So now I'm a pretty good writer. I mean, I'm like when I can pick up a book, and I just read Tricky Ground again to refresh myself for where it had ended up. And when I can read a book that I've written myself and that's, that I've read that many times and still enjoy it, I know it has to be a good story. But
I love those
figuring
moments.
out how to promote it is the thing that I am not good at.
Yeah, if only your publisher were good at that. But
well, if only my publisher didn't have 5 jobs,
yeah, that's true. That's true. But yeah, I mean, figuring out, we've talked about this. How do you break through the noise?
Yeah.
How do we get people to just hear about the I feel like once people read it, they will realize this is such a fun series. And so how do we get it into their hands? And that's always been the challenge. But if folks are hearing this, we've cut through the noise enough that you're hearing this. Please check out this trilogy.
And I do, and I don't have the details yet on when it's going to air, but I am recording another podcast that should be out next week. Eric Mertz, who's a paranormal
yes, I know Eric. He's
writer from he and somebody else put their heads together and we're trying to figure out how to start doing more publicity. And so he's starting to do this series of podcasts. And so we will be recording that Saturday. So that will be coming out. And it's just, well, part of my problem is I have this pathological fear of holding a party that nobody comes to. I mean, it makes my stomach knot.
Yeah.
And so figuring out how to put together events, and I don't, going to a book signing someplace or, something like that, it doesn't bother me. But the idea of having to be the one that puts it together and is sitting there, and anyway.
I was telling somebody on Twitter, an author that I don't even know posted about how she had just had a signing and, only 2 people came or something. And she sat there for 3 hours and only signed 2 books. And she was, very sad. And I was like, no, this is a rite of passage for authors. We have those experiences where you sit there and you sit there. But
it's funny that somehow sitting at a signing, I don't expect a lot because I don't have a huge fan base at this point. I don't expect a lot of people. I expect the people that would show up to that bookstore, to maybe stop and so I don't expect a lot. But if I put on a party and I've invited people,
and then they don't,
then nobody shows up.
Yes. So we have to find a high traffic bookstore anyway, and then have the people come to that. And that's the trick.
Yeah, well, or just wait and do it the first week in August.
right. Yes. I mean,
I think Not a Pipe ought to have a book party aside from the.
Yeah, but nearby. Maybe that's our solution
when there's people there. But anyway.
No, that's not a bad idea, actually. Let's talk about it.
Let's do
plan something.
So anyway, trying to figure out and trying to I've got I finally started an online newsletter, and I'm trying to grow the mailing list on that, and it's not very big right now, but
how can people get on your mailing list?
If they just go to my website, there's a link there. That's the easiest way to find it.
We will put that in the show notes. So everybody who's listening to this, watching this, go click, get on that mailing list.
Yeah, because you can find out about it, and the button there won't automatically subscribe you. It will take you to the welcome page that'll tell you more about the newsletter and give you the option there to subscribe. And of course, like all good subscriptions, you can unsubscribe at any time.
Right.
But I'm looking at once a month, and I'm looking at doing the first couple are some excerpts from the book, and then there's a free offering if you subscribe. That's a short story that's actually prequel to the book series, just a little introduction to one of the characters. So doing that kind of thing and not burdening people with a whole bunch of stuff in their inbox all the time, and giving them something fun to read. So.
Yeah, well, and freebies. Folks should sign up.
Yeah. So that's most of the newsletter will be an original piece. A lot of that may be exclusive. Some of those will be exclusive to the newsletter.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Well, yeah,
And
folks, I encourage you, go sign up, get that.
yeah, so I'll be trying to get that word out. And I think that takes an individual approach to a large degree of starting with people that actually know who you are.
Right. And seeing if they will then ask a friend. Like, it's creating that momentum, let somebody know about this.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, I don't have twitches. I just have a cat that's pestering me.
Oh, yes.
She's getting her claws caught.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
She's getting her claws caught in the side of the chair, and then I have to. Anyway, no more cat.
She's helping.
No more cat stories.
So you have an idea about our weekly poll. What should be our weekly poll for this next week?
Well, it's springtime. Like I said, I don't really like to call things weeds, but some people do. And one of the first things that shows up in our lawns and everywhere else, and their bright yellow faces, are dandelions. So are dandelions heroes or villains? And I thought 4 choices. One would be hero, one would be villain, one would be who cares, and one would be I don't think this will get very many votes, but what's a dandelion?
That's a dandelion. Well, I won't post a picture with the poll because that would make that one completely unnecessary.
Yeah, I think most people, even in more urban areas, know what a dandelion is because they've managed to establish themselves pretty much everywhere.
Oh yeah, they're absolutely everywhere, but they are beautiful. I mean, they are, until they change form.
So let's not.
Yeah, we won't bias.
Influence the poll.
We'll let people decide what they think, but I could see people going either way on that. So
yeah. And sometimes it depends on where they're growing, which side of that you fall.
Well, and King uses them as a metaphor for Stephen King uses them as a metaphor for adverbs in your prose, and he says 1 or 2 in your garden are nice, but if you don't deal with them, they will go nuts.
I hadn't heard that, but that's good.
Yes, so that's why you watch out. 1 or 2 are fine to decorate, but not too many. So what's on your to read pile? What are you looking to read?
I've got, like most of us, I've got a pretty big to be read pile. But the one I'm waiting for right now, I've just pre-ordered it and it will be out soon, is an anthology called Life Beyond Us. And it is put together by, of all things, the European Astrobiology Institute. And they put out a call for science fiction short stories that I believe had some kind of alien life in them. And they've selected 27 of those, and they paired them up with astrobiologists who then wrote scientific essays relating to that short story. And Bizelkovich, who was on this podcast earlier, actually has a story in it. She's so thrilled. She couldn't believe she got in. But I'm fascinated because with a biology background, I've got a natural resources biology background. And so that look at life and what life forms might look at and stuff just fascinates me. So I'm really waiting for that one to arrive. Plus, I love anthologies because I don't have to sit there and read the whole thing in one sitting, or or even I can read 2 stories out of it today, and I can go back in a week and read a couple of stories.
Yeah, bite-sized.
So
that one does sound just fantastic. When Bizelkovich described it to me, I was like, that sounds really cool, but I didn't realize when it came out. So that comes out in a week. So
the release date is April 22nd. So
yeah, that sounds really fantastic. I will be checking that out for sure. Mine is Cory Doctorow's Radicalized. Science fiction author, is a series of short stories that are dystopic. And so I'm like, that's another, I think it's a series of short stories. Yes. It's 4 different large stories, novellas, essentially. That are all dystopias. So that's one where I'm going, yep, I really should. I saw it and I was like, yeah, I need
Yeah.
to check that one out. So I'll get around to that.
One more word on tricky ground. It's not dystopian.
No.
Carico is not a dystopian world. So if you're tired of dystopia,
Yes, it is not. No, but it's also not utopian. Like it is
no,
a very real colony world with challenges, but it's not this awful, miserable, awful place to try and scratch out a,
yeah, it's not
survival.
someplace people are trying to get away from.
Right, right.
I wish
Yeah.
they could.
Yeah. In fact, they're potentially fighting over it. How can we get to, I don't want to give anything away. People should read it. Really good.
Yeah.
Avoiding fighting. Oh no, I'm doing it again. How can folks find you online and get more information about you and the books?
Well, my website is a good spot, which is well, you'll put the link.
Yeah, I'll put the link in here. Nan C
so
Ballard, writer at blogspot.com. I'll certainly put that in the show notes.
And you can go there to find out more information on the books. You can go there to sign up for the newsletter. I had used it as a blog for a while, but I'm not really doing that anymore because I'll move that material into the newsletter.
Yeah.
Nan C Ballard, author page on Facebook. I'm probably on Facebook. I'm on Facebook once a day or so usually. I'm not a real big social media user. At Nan C Ballard on Instagram, and there you can see some usually photographs of my neighborhood and my neighbors. I took a couple today of a tom turkey.
Yeah, I like your follow on Instagram. I encourage people to follow you on Instagram because it's just nature shots. Like it's yeah, I like that. So
yeah, he was right. I only let the horses out on the green grass for a couple hours a day this time of year in particular, and he was strutting his stuff right in the middle of where they were going to come running through in a minute.
Yeah.
And then Nan C Ballard again on Goodreads, and I don't have as much there as I should, but one of my goals for the coming months is to start posting more reviews of other people's works because I have so much access to so much really good material. It's one of the pluses or minuses of being a writer is you know other writers, and there's always stuff. You don't ever have to go looking for something.
Well, and I encourage you to, because people are on different platforms and content is king, if you write something for Goodreads, also put that on Facebook. Facebook also put that, so that you're on these, because otherwise, if you have to create individual content for both, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
A lot.
I'm getting more and more to where I'll create like a text file for the content and then I'll drop it into. But I'm still trying to figure out how to share some things and how to get good links and get links to come through properly and all of that. But I'm trying.
Well, and some of the sites are better for that. I mean, Instagram is like no links, so different sites are better for that than others. Certainly.
Yeah. I'm just an old dog learning new tricks. What can I say?
It's a lot. Well, and the nice thing is we're all in the same boat because it's changing so fast that even the folks who are, who 21 years old are saying, I need to learn a new way to do this because it's not the way it was when I was 18. Like it is, so it is the speed of the internet is an equalizer.
We forgot something, Ben.
What did we forget?
The secret word.
Oh no, we'll come back to that at the end. Yes.
That's okay. Got it.
So before we get to our send-off, I need to thank some folks. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to Halizna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and would like your song used on the show, I would love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song. So email that to me or email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making the show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. We always appreciate your work, Doug. Thank you very much. And I cannot forget to mention, Writers Not Writing is a production of Not a Pipe Publishing. So please go to notapipepublishing.com. Check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it. Please check out Nan's book, Under Carico's Moons, that trilogy. Rate and review those two, make her day. Even a short review and a single click on that 5th star makes a huge difference to authors. So if you have 3 minutes, go click that 5th star, explain why you liked it. That really makes a big difference. I am too old to yell smash that like button without sounding absolutely ridiculous. So instead, if you could gently tap the like button for this show, tap it an odd number of times. I would really appreciate that. Tell folks, if you've got, tell a friend about the show. If you know a reader who would like to get to know writers, this is a great opportunity for that as well. So now for our send-off, Nan and I want you to remember 3 things this week. What's our first one?
Oh, let me see. Words matter. Choose yours carefully.
Completely agree. Second, in life, as in writing, it's the spaces between the words that make it all meaningful. So don't ignore the spaces. And third, no matter how much you procrastinate, we're still proud of you.
If I take my time